I had been in Willow Creek for less than 24 hours when the screaming started. It wasn't the kind of scream you hear from kids roughhousing, or even a drunken argument spilling out into the street. It was sharper, rawer, like someone's final breath tearing through the night. The sound split the silence so cleanly that my hands froze above the last cardboard box I hadn't unpacked. The clubhouse sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, a hulking brick structure that looked more like an abandoned schoolhouse than a community gathering space. Its windows were dark, locked, just as they had been when the realtor showed me the place. Yet the scream had come from there. I would have sworn it. Before I could even process it, there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp raps, 2 deliberate to be casual. I opened it to find a woman standing stiffly under the porch light. Mid-50s. Iron gray hair pinned tight. HOA badge clipped to her blazer like a police shield. She smiled without warmth. "Mr. Carter, I'm Mrs. Kellen, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Welcome." I muttered thanks, but my eyes kept sliding past her shoulder, back toward the clubhouse. She held out a clipboard stacked with forms. "Sign these acknowledgement rules," she said. "We don't usually do this at night, but best to keep everything official." The timing was absurd. Midnight, on my first night here, with the echo of that scream still ringing in my skull. Yet her tone was non-negotiable. I scribbled my signature, my hands still trembling. When I glanced back up, I caught something behind her just for a second. The clubhouse across the street had lit up, one upstairs window glowing pale yellow. For the briefest moment, a figure sat there in silhouette, perfectly still, watching. "Everything all right?" she asked, catching my stare. I forced a nod. "Fine." She tucked the clipboard under her arm. "Good. And Mr. Carter, sometimes new residents think they hear things at night. Old pipes. Wind in the ducts. Don't let it spook you." Her eyes narrowed as though testing me. This neighborhood values composure. She left without another word, her heels tapping like gunshots down the walk. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the image of that motionless figure in the window. Around 3 a.m., my security camera pinged an alert. Half asleep, I pulled the feed onto my phone. There it was, the clubhouse glowing again. A grainy frame of the upstairs window. The figure sat exactly where I'd seen it earlier, head tilted slightly, like it was listening. I scrubbed the footage back. 30 seconds. A minute. The thing never moved. Not a blink, not a twitch. Just a shadow sculpted into the shape of a person. By morning, I convinced myself it was a trick of the lens. Until I went outside. Something was stuck to my front door, a small scrap of paper, written in thick, uneven strokes, like it had been scrawled in the dark. You didn't hear it. I didn't sleep. By morning, the note still clung to my door like a dare. I tucked it into a folder and walked the block, trying to look neighborly while scanning for anyone who'd admit they'd heard it too. Mrs. Pike garden gloves on. Pruning roses gave me the first opening. "New, right," she said, eyes sliding past my shoulder toward the clubhouse. "You'll get used to the quiet." "It wasn't quiet last night," I said. "Did you hear?" She flinched. "Pipes. Always the pipes here." Her shears clicked twice, too fast. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Then she retreated behind a trellis as if she'd said too much. 2 houses down, an older man in a U.S. Navy cap watered the same square of lawn again and again. "Sir," I said, showing him the HOA welcome packet, "do you know if that building is monitored at night?" He squinted, following my glance to the clubhouse. Monitored. He shut off the hose. "They say the lights cut at 10. "They don't. Not really." His voice softened. "You didn't hear that from me." Before I could ask more, a black SUV slid to the curb. The window lowered to reveal Mrs. Kellen, smile lacquered over steel. "Mr. Carter, a word." I stepped closer. The air inside the SUV smelled like lemon disinfectant. "We take rumors seriously," she said. "HVAC in older structures can mimic unpleasant sounds. Please refrain from alarming residents. There's no basement at the clubhouse, only a service crawl space, locked for safety." She paused. "If you persist, the board will have to enforce compliance. Section 8.4 covers creating public disturbance." "Do you understand? I understand you came by at midnight and had me sign rules while someone screamed across the street." Her smile didn't move. "Welcome packets must be acknowledged within 24 hours. Efficiency is a value here." The window lifted. The SUV rolled away. Back home. I pulled last night's security footage onto my laptop. The upstairs window again, the still figure. I exported the clip, then opened it in a different program out of habit. That's when I heard it soft, close, a slow inhale right against the mic, followed by 2 staccato exhalations. My camera didn't have audio enabled. I'd never wired a mic. I checked the metadata, no audio track listed. I replayed the export. The breathing was there. On the waveform view, a thin gray pulse rose and fell like a heartbeat. I leaned in until the screen reflected my face. Between the breaths, something brushed the noise floor, 3 faint taps, evenly spaced. Tap, tap, tap. Morse I scribbled dots and dashes on a scrap, chasing a pattern. But the spacing wasn't clean enough to trust. The taps repeated once, then stopped, replaced by a new sound pressure on fabric, a whisper of movement. The figure in the window never shifted, yet the microphone recorded someone drawing closer. I killed the audio and kept scrubbing the frames. At 3:02:11, the upstairs light fluttered. For a single frame, the silhouette's head angled, chin dipping as if to listen, then back to its original pose, sculpture, still. My email pinged. The address was a burner pergola, watch proton mail. Subject line, last night, 03:02 a.m., no greeting, just a single line of text and one attached photo. The attachment was a high ISO shot of the clubhouse from a low angle, taken from the hedgerow by the eastern lot. The upstairs window glowed. In the reflection on the glass, the photographer's position was obvious, too close to be accidental. In the bottom corner, a slice of metal was visible in the reflection, like the edge of a locked gate half ajar. Over the photo, someone had typed "ask about the basement." I stared at it for a long minute, the word basement gripping nerves I didn't know I still had. I replied the professional way, brief, precise. "Who are you? What did you hear? How do you know about a basement?" Another email arrived before I could breathe. No address in the body, no signature, just a second attachment, a scan of a yellowing community map marked in red pencil. "Keep it sealed" was scrawled along the rectangle that corresponded to the clubhouse footprint. A small arrow pointed to an unlabeled square beneath the main hall. Under the scan, one more line of text. She calls it a crawl space. It isn't. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then the final message. 10 years ago, someone went down there to fix a pump. He didn't come back. They said he moved. He didn't. You're good with patterns. Mr. Carter, listen to the taps. Then ask her where she put him. A cold draft found its way under my shirt, though the vents were off. I reopened the export and let the ghost breath play. Tap, tap, tap. I clicked back to the still frame of the silhouette. It sat in place, tranquil as an absence. A shadow drifted across my living room wall. I turned, only my porch flag moving in a mild breeze. My phone buzzed again. One more email. No attachment this time. 5 words, centered in the body. spaced, as if placed with trembling hands. She buried him there. I sat very still, the cursor blinking in a blank reply I couldn't begin to write. The neighborhood hummed with weekday normal leaf blowers, a distant delivery truck, the splash of a sprinkler's arc. Across the cul-de-sac, the clubhouse stared back with its blind brick face, its bright window now as blank as any sky. I don't scare easily, but I know what systems look like when they hide their own errors. I know how documents are sanitized, how timelines get trimmed until truth falls neatly outside the frame. Willow Creek suddenly looked like that, edges shaved, noise filtered, the screaming filed under HVAC. I closed the laptop. The choice landed in my chest with a heavy, simple weight. Go ask her. Go find the door she says doesn't exist. Or pretend I moved here for peace and not the thing I am, someone who walks toward the sound. Tell me honestly, would you go down into that basement at 3 a.m.? I thought the note on my door would be the last warning. Instead, it was only the start. By the second week, the letters from the HOA came daily, bright envelopes, stamped, notice of violation in block capitals. The first accused me of excessive exterior lighting. My porch bulb was 40 watts. The second fined me for improper trash receptacle placement. I'd left the can 18 inches from the curb, not 24. The third claimed my lawn length exceeded regulation by a quarter inch. I taped them to the fridge in a row. 3 days, 3 infractions, a pattern designed to grind me down. Still, the clubhouse kept stealing my attention. Every night at 3:02 a.m., the upstairs light glowed. My camera feeds caught it without fail. And every morning, Mrs. Kellen's SUV glided past at dawn, pausing just long enough for her to glance at my driveway, as if she were checking that I hadn't moved. Then came the noise. It started one night as I brushed my teeth. A hollow knocking carried through the bathroom pipes, 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Not the clunk of water pressure, but a rhythm. Intentional. I crouched, pressing my ear against the cabinet. The knocking came again, slower, spaced like someone struggling to keep count. Tap, tap, tap. I recorded the sound with my phone, replaying it until the knocks drilled into my skull. Morse code. A signal I scribbled possible letters, but nothing lined up. Unless some taps were missing, muffled by distance. The next day I asked around. At the mailboxes, a young mother named Jessica flinched when I mentioned the noise. "We don't talk about that," she whispered. She shifted her toddler higher on her hip and hurried away. At dinner, I unfolded the community map I'd been sent by the anonymous emailer. The red scrawl still bled across the page, "Keep it sealed." My eyes caught something I'd missed before, an unlabeled hatch marked under the clubhouse's main hall, not a crawl space. A square large enough to hide a room. My phone buzzed. Another violation, wind chimes audible past 9:00 p.m. I didn't own wind chimes. That night, the knocking returned. This time faster, almost frantic. I set my recorder beside the sink and listened. The pipes rattled like knuckles against hollow bone, and layered beneath, just at the edge of perception, came a new sound, wet, muffled, like someone crying into fabric. I ripped the cabinet doors wide. Nothing, just copper lines, a dark smear of mildew, and water hissing low in the joints. But when I leaned closer, the knocking stopped. The pipes vibrated one last time, then fell dead silent. I backed away, breath sharp. My phone pinged with a new message. No text, no subject line, just the same photo of the clubhouse as before. This time, though, someone had drawn a red circle around the base of the building. The caption: "The basement is still breathing. I didn't sleep." By sunrise, another letter waited in my mailbox. The paper was the same, the header the same. but the ink wasn't. The fine failure to maintain mailbox paint was printed in thick, smeared red, not ink. Something darker, something that had seeped into the fibers like a stain that wouldn't wash out. The letter with red ink blood, or something that wanted to be mistaken for blood, didn't vanish when I shoved it into a drawer. It haunted the back of my mind through every errand, every forced smile at the neighbors. By evening, I had to know if anyone else had seen the same. At the community library annex, I requested archived HOA records. The clerk, a boy barely out of high school, frowned when my search term clubhouse maintenance logs froze his screen. "That file's restricted," he said. "I'll need board approval." Board approval meant Mrs. Kellen. I left empty-handed. That night, as I walked home past the cul-de-sac, I saw her waiting by my driveway. The SUV idled, headlights off. When I approached, her window hummed down. "You're attracting attention," she said. "That's dangerous for everyone." I got another violation notice. I said, "Red ink this time." Her smile didn't touch her eyes. Ink is ink. If you keep suggesting otherwise, I'll have no choice but to cite you for defamation, or harassment, or both. She leaned forward. "This community thrives on order. Don't make me enforce it." Then she rolled up the window and drove into the dark. Inside, I dug through the moving boxes I hadn't finished unpacking. One belonged to the house's former owner, left behind in the attic crawl. I'd assumed it was junk old cookbooks, tax forms. But wedged between them was a spiral-bound notebook, its first page labeled in slanted cursive Patricia, summer 2013. Most entries were banal grocery lists, petty notes about fines. But halfway through, her tone changed. July 9th. Heard the crying again. Not a baby. Too deep. Too ragged. It came from the clubhouse walls. July 14th. HOA says it's pipes, but pipes don't whisper names. My stomach clenched. The next entry was scratched in hurried graphite, letters digging trenches into the paper. July 18th. She told me to stop asking. Said if I keep pushing, I'll disappear like the rest. The page tore there, jagged like it had been ripped out. I sat back, pulse thudding. This wasn't rumor anymore, it was testimony. And Patricia had left the neighborhood within months. If the real estate listing was right, the next HOA meeting was 2 nights later. I went early, clutching the notebook. The clubhouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, but beneath it, damp stone and mold. Neighbors filled the folding chairs, chatting about landscaping, parking spaces, petty grievances. Mrs. Kellen presided at the head table, every motion crisp. For half an hour it was ordinary. Then, just as a young man rose to complain about pool fees, the speakers screeched, the microphone on the table snapped alive by itself, and through it came the scream. It was the same pitch, the same tearing desperation I'd heard on my first night, raw, continuous, as if someone were trapped inside the sound system itself. People clapped hands over their ears. The lights flickered, then it cut, mid-breath. The room sagged into silence. Everyone turned to the man who had stood to speak. His chair still rocked from his exit, but he was gone. Not walking down the aisle, not slipping out the side door, simply gone. Gasps erupted. A woman shouted his name. Chairs scraped as people stood. At the head table, Mrs. Kellen raised both palms for calm. Her voice was ice. "Please." He must have stepped outside. Nothing more. Her dismissal cracked against the panic. A calm so rehearsed it felt weaponized. I looked around. Dozens of neighbors stared at the empty chair. Some whispered. Some refused to meet my eye. But I knew. I'd seen the way the air had twisted as the scream cut out. I'd heard it. The notebook burned in my grip. The missing page suddenly meant more than I wanted it to. Patricia had warned, if I keep pushing, I'll disappear like the rest. Now someone else had. And the president of the HOA, the woman who claimed there was no basement, was still smiling. Tell me, do you think what happened tonight was supernatural? Or a cover-up hiding something even worse by the time the sun rose the next morning? I knew the meeting hadn't been a hallucination. Everyone in that room had heard the scream. Everyone had seen the empty chair still rocking. But by dawn, the HOA's official email bulletin offered its explanation. Mr. Daniels departed abruptly due to a family emergency. Please respect his privacy. It was a lie written in polite font, and the more polished the wording, the more I knew what it was hiding. I returned to the annex that afternoon. This time, instead of requesting maintenance logs, I asked for HOA board meeting minutes. The clerk hesitated, then slid me a folder with dates spanning 15 years. I sat at a table beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, flipping pages fast. Most minutes were dull landscaping contracts, budget approvals. Then July 2013, the month Patricia's diary stopped. I found the entry, but the page had been violently ripped out. Jagged edges still clung to the binding. The record jumped from June 30th directly to August 12th with no July notes preserved. When I asked the clerk about it, he paled. If it's missing, that's an error in archiving. His voice quavered. Or the board restricted it. Restricted. Erased. Both words fit too well. On my way out, I passed the clubhouse foyer. A gallery of framed photos lined the wall, ribbon cuttings, bake sales, community events. My eyes caught one dated 2008 grand opening. A cheerful crowd stood in front of the still pristine brick. But at the far right, a single figure had been blotted out, face and torso blacked over with permanent marker. Crude strokes slashed across where a man had once stood, his outline faint beneath the vandalism. I snapped a picture. Behind me, the overhead light flickered once, then held steady. That night, I printed the photo and pinned it beside Patricia's diary page. Together, they told the same story someone had been cut out. First from records, then from memory. The next clue found me by accident. Around midnight, a sudden pop snapped me awake. My house lights died. I grabbed a flashlight, tracing the outage to the fuse box in the garage. When I opened it, a small brass object clattered onto the floor. Not a fuse, a key, old-fashioned, heavy, its teeth dulled by time. I turned it in my hand. Stamped across the bow in faded lettering was one word, clubhouse. The power surged back on. My flashlight beam dimmed, then guttered out. I stood in the humming dark, gripping that key like proof I hadn't imagined the entire last 2 weeks. What was worse, someone had placed it there for me to find, or it had worked its way free from wherever it had been hidden, demanding to be noticed. Either way, I knew what it meant. The basement, the one Kellen denied, had a door, and now I had its teeth. But even as the thought hardened, so did the fear. If Patricia had been silenced for asking questions, if Daniels had vanished in front of dozens of witnesses, what would happen to me the moment I tried that lock? I slipped the key into a sealed envelope and hid it under a loose floorboard in my study. It felt like burying contraband or planting bait. Outside. The clubhouse window glowed again at 3:02. Only this time, when I zoomed the camera lens, the figure wasn't seated. It was standing, still as stone, watching. And this time, the upstairs curtain twitched as if something wanted me to know it had seen me back. The key didn't leave my mind. For 2 days I resisted, telling myself it was bait, a setup. But every night at 3:02, the clubhouse window lit, and the figure inside shifted closer to the glass as though waiting for me to act. On the third night, I gave in. I slipped the key into my pocket, pulled on gloves, and crossed the cul-de-sac. The air was heavy, charged, as if the whole neighborhood held its breath. The clubhouse loomed ahead, its bricks damp under the street lamps. I half expected floodlights or cameras, but the building sat blank and blind, except for that glowing window upstairs. The front door resisted until the key turned. The tumblers clicked, and the door swung open without a sound. The air inside was cold, not stale but occupied, like someone had just left. I crept down the hallway. My flashlight beam caught notice boards filled with cheery announcements, potlucks, pool rules, ice cream socials. Normal life staged against something else that throbbed beneath the walls. At the rear of the main hall, I found it a locked hatch, flush with the floor. The brass ring was scuffed from use. My key slid in smoothly, as if it had been waiting. The hatch groaned open. A waft of damp earth and rusted metal rose up. My light skated over concrete steps, descending into darkness. I forced myself down. The basement wasn't a crawl space. It was a room, a wide, unfinished chamber beneath the hall, its walls dripping with condensation. The beam swept across a rusted folding chair. Its back snapped. A length of rope lay nearby, frayed, one end still knotted as if it had been tied around something or someone. Then the wall. 4 parallel gouges scored the cinder block, deep as fingernail trenches. I touched them. The grooves were fresh, not worn smooth by time. Whoever had clawed here had done it desperately, recently. A whisper brushed my ear. "Don't leave me here." I spun, light jerking across the room, empty. My breath clouded, visible though the air wasn't cold enough for frost. The whisper came again, closer, right behind me. "Don't leave me here." My beam landed on a water-stained support pillar. And there, half hidden in grime, I saw it initials scratched into the surface. D.R. My mind jolted Daniels, the man who had vanished from his chair less than a week ago. Before I could move, footsteps pounded above. The hatch slammed. A beam of brighter light lanced down Mrs. Kellen, her silhouette sharp against the frame. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, like this was just another violation notice. Trespassing, forced entry. "I can have the sheriff here in 10 minutes. You told everyone this was a crawl space." My words echoed off the wet walls. "It isn't." Her smile tightened. "What you think you found is nothing. Junk left behind by contractors. But if you spread lies, if you disrupt the community again, I'll bury you in lawsuits until you're begging to leave." I raised the flashlight, then explained the rope, the claw marks, explained Daniel's initials. For the first time, something twitched in her expression, a flicker, almost fear, but it hardened instantly back to steel. "Go home. Mr. Carter, consider this your final warning." The hatch slammed shut. Darkness swallowed me whole. I clawed for the stairs, every nerve screaming. By the time I hauled the hatch open, the hall was empty. No footsteps, no SUV outside, just silence. I staggered back across the cul-de-sac, heart hammering. My camera feed was still running. I checked it the moment I got inside. There on the clubhouse window, a handprint smeared in dust on the inside of the glass. Not fresh enough to be mine, too large, too sharp. As I watched, a second handprint appeared beside it. Then both slowly dragged downward, leaving streaks like someone was being pulled away from the light. Tell me honestly, if you saw those handprints appear in real time, would you call the police or keep quiet, knowing the HOA controls everything? The HOA called it a community dinner, as if fried chicken and sweet tea could erase the sound of that scream still stuck in every throat. I went anyway. If the board wanted a show, I wanted the front row. The clubhouse had been dressed up for the occasion. White tablecloths, plastic flower centerpieces, fairy lights strung across the rafters. Neighbors lined the buffet, balancing paper plates and polite conversation. It looked normal, manufactured normal, but the smell lingered. Beneath lemon polish and baked beans, that damp stone scent crept through. Rising from the basement, Mrs. Kellen swore didn't exist. She floated from table to table, radiant in a red blazer, greeting everyone by name, pretending the room hadn't swallowed Daniel's whole just days before. When she reached me, her smile locked in place like porcelain. "Mr. Carter," she said warmly enough to fool anyone watching. "Enjoying the evening depends." I said, "Will the program include disappearing acts again?" Her pupils flicked, just once, before the smile rehardened. "Rumors," she whispered. "Dangerous currency. Best to stop spending them." Then she turned and glided away, leaving my appetite in ashes. I sat near the back, noting who avoided my eyes. A few nodded, quickly, like they wanted me to keep going but were too afraid to say it out loud. Halfway through the meal, the overhead lights flickered. A hush fell, forks clinking midair. Then the microphone on the stage cracked alive. Feedback shrieked. And then again the scream. It ripped through the PA system, longer, sharper, filling the rafters. Parents clamped hands over children's ears. Someone dropped a tray. It shattered against the floor. The fairy lights buzzed, one bulb popping like a firecracker. The sound cut. The lights steadied. And that's when I saw it. At the table nearest the stage. A woman had been laughing a moment before, her plate of food half finished. Now her chair rocked empty, still vibrating from her sudden absence. The paper plate slid to the carpet, mashed potatoes smearing across the rug. She was gone. Gasps erupted. A man shouted her name. Others searched under the tables, as if she might be crouched there. Nothing. Just silence. And the chair trembling like it still remembered her weight. I stood, my phone already raised, snapping photos, recording video. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. Proof mattered. On stage. Mrs. Kellen approached the mic. She adjusted it calmly, her blazer crisp under the fairy lights. "Please," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "Remain seated." I'm sure she stepped outside for air. Nobody believed that. Not after Daniel's. Not after the scream. But no one argued. The room sagged into fearful quiet. Neighbors whispering in panicked bursts. I checked my phone feed. The video showed the woman laughing, lifting her fork then in a blur between frames, the chair empty, her plate sliding down, no exit, no figure walking away. She had simply ceased to exist. A cold weight filled my chest. This wasn't a private haunting anymore. It was public, undeniable, and Mrs. Kellen, the only one who should have been rattled, looked steadier than ever. As the dinner wound down in forced silence, I slipped outside. My camera feed still recorded. Across the street, the upstairs clubhouse window glowed faintly, even though I was standing right beneath it. When I zoomed in, the curtain twitched. For a single frame, I could swear a hand pulled it closed. The chair inside still rocked. I didn't leave the dinner empty-handed. My phone was crammed with photos, videos, raw proof that no one vanished by stepping outside, proof that the scream was more than pipes or faulty wires. Back home, I uploaded the footage to my laptop, frame by frame. I slowed the moment of disappearance. At timestamp 19:43:11, the woman was mid-laugh, fork lifted. At 19:43:12, her chair jolted, empty. But it wasn't just absence. In the fraction of a second between frames, something else bled into the pixels. A smear of pale light like the outline of a face pressed against glass hovered right behind her shoulder. White. blurred, then gone. My breath hitched. I zoomed until the pixels broke apart. It wasn't artifact. It was shape. A human shape. I replayed, slower still. And this time, I noticed the stage. Behind Mrs. Kellen, as she adjusted the microphone, a faint blur wavered, the suggestion of a figure standing inches from her back, head bent as if whispering into her ear. She hadn't flinched. Not once. The next morning, I canvassed the neighborhood. Most avoided me. Some muttered it was best not to stir things further, but 2 residents, pale with fear, admitted they'd seen it too. The blur, the sudden absence. It's like the air swallowed her. One whispered. That night, I set every camera in my house to record the clubhouse. Front, side, zoom lens trained on that upstairs window. At 3:02 a.m., it began. The upstairs light blinked on. My feeds flickered. For a second, all cameras froze on a single identical frame, not the clubhouse exterior, but the close-up of a woman's mouth wide open, screaming. Every lens, every angle, hijacked. The audio blared through my speakers in sync, the same scream from the dinner, the same from the meeting. My walls shook. I ripped out the Ethernet, but the feeds kept playing. When the image snapped back to normal, the clubhouse sat still, dark again. My cameras reset themselves, as if nothing had happened. A knock came at my door. I froze, heart hammering. When I opened it, no one stood outside, just a manila envelope lying on the porch, no return address. Inside, photocopied pages of an old coroner's report, stained, faded, but legible. Date July 20th, 2013, cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, location Willow Creek Clubhouse, basement level, victim's name redacted. My pulse roared in my ears. 10 years ago. Exactly when Patricia's journal had ended, exactly when the meeting minutes had been torn out. I scanned the last page. At the bottom, a handwritten note in pencil. He never left this place. She made sure no one would ever find him. My phone vibrated. A new anonymous email popped up. The subject line read only, "Now you know." The body of the email was 5 words. Ask her why she lied. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My reflection in the glass looked pale, strained, not entirely mine. I wanted to believe this was all political corruption, HOA overreach gone rabid, that the basement hid crimes buried in paperwork, not bones in the dirt. But the screams hijacking my cameras, the vanishing in full view, the handprints dragging down the glass, those weren't just cover-ups. They were something else, something older, hungrier, still breathing under that building. And yet the name, redacted, mocked me. Who had they hidden? Whose death was so dangerous the board had rewritten history? I folded the report, locked it in my desk. My decision was made. At the next meeting, I would confront her, force the truth into daylight. But in the silence of my house, another question coiled tighter than any plan. Do you think the HOA president is covering up an ordinary murder or something far worse that still moves in the dark beneath that clubhouse? The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening. I arrived early. The coroner's report folded in my jacket pocket like a loaded weapon. Neighbors filtered in with casseroles and coffee, their smiles brittle. They had all seen someone vanish now. They had all heard the scream, yet they acted as though the meeting were routine. Fear does that. It teaches people to perform normalcy. Mrs. Kellen presided at the head of the long table. Her red blazer gleamed under the fluorescence, her clipboard stacked with violations ready for distribution. When she saw me, her mouth curved. Not quite a smile, more like the tension of a bowstring pulled taut. The meeting began with budgets, pool hours, landscaping proposals. I waited, blood drumming in my ears. Finally, during new business, I stood, I have evidence the board has concealed, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. I laid the coroner's report on the table, the faded pages sliding into the fluorescent light. A death occurred in this clubhouse. July 2013. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. The body was found in the basement the president insists doesn't exist. A ripple of gasps spread. Chairs creaked. Some residents leaned forward, others stiffened. Kellen's hand stilled over her clipboard. For one breath. The mask slipped, her lips thinned, eyes flashing. Then she laughed, sharp and brittle. "Fabrications," she said. "Mr. Carter has a gift for theatrics. Anyone can doctor an old report. Perhaps he printed it himself. Basements, screams, vanishings. He spins ghost stories while real homeowners wait for answers on fence heights." Her dismissiveness almost worked. A few neighbors chuckled nervously. But I raised my phone, then explained this. On the screen, I played the footage from the dinner. The woman laughing, then gone. Her chair still rocking. The blur at Kellen's shoulder. The scream hijacking every mic. Silence swallowed the room. Kellen slammed her hand down. "Enough! This circus ends now!" Her voice cracked through the mic. The speakers shrieked with feedback then. Without warning, the scream erupted again. Not from my phone, not from any recording. From the speakers themselves, every one of them. The sound filled the hall, rattling the windows, shaking the floorboards. People clutched their ears. The lights flickered. Outside. I could hear it echoing, projected through every street-mounted speaker in the neighborhood. The scream spread like wildfire, a siren of agony stitched into the air. I shouted over it, "Tell them the truth!" Kellen's face twisted, pale under the fluorescent glare. She fumbled with the mic, trying to cut it off, but the scream only grew louder, layered, like more than one voice, like a chorus. Then suddenly, it stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. Neighbors panted, their faces drained, staring at the president of the HOA as if she'd conjured hell itself. And then one voice rose. From the back row, an elderly man pushed to his feet. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. "I saw you," he said, pointing at Kellen. "That night, you dragged a bag into the clubhouse basement. Heavy enough you needed help. I know what was in it. I know who never came back out." Gasps broke again, sharper this time. Dozens of eyes turned from him to her. Mrs. Kellen's mouth opened, but no words came. The room wasn't hers anymore. The room seemed to collapse inward after the old man's words. Neighbors whispered, chairs scraped. Someone stifled a sob. All eyes fixed on Mrs. Kellen. Her lips parted, but the words died in her throat. She gripped the microphone stand as though it could steady her. "Lies," she whispered, though the words sounded more like a plea. The man shook his head. "I saw you. July 2013, midnight. You and another board member dragged a black contractor's bag through that hall. It dripped." His voice faltered, but he straightened. "The next day, that board member was gone. You never mentioned him again." The crowd erupted, gasps, accusations, voices rising like a wave. "Where did she put the body? What happened to Daniels?" My God. Was Patricia right? Kellen slammed the mic down. "Enough!" The speakers screamed with feedback. Lights overhead flared, buzzing, then snapped into darkness. In the pitch black, the scream returned, louder, layered, dozens of voices at once. I clutched my phone, recording blind. The sound wasn't just pain anymore, it was names. Patricia, Daniels, Robert. Each cry was distinct, each swallowed in the chorus. The emergency lights flicked on, and with them, the clubhouse doors at the back burst open. A gust of cold air swept through, lifting papers from tables. and from the darkness of the hall beyond, something emerged. A shape, blacker than shadow, stretched tall and thin, its edges ragged as if torn from fabric. It moved with a sickening fluidity, sliding more than walking. The air grew colder with every inch it crossed. Gasps turned to screams. People shoved for the exits, but the doors slammed shut on their own, rattling against frantic hands. The shadow reached the stage. It loomed behind Kellen, dwarfing her. She staggered, microphone stand clattering to the floor. "Stop this," she cried, voice cracking. "I kept it sealed. I did everything you asked." Her words hit me like a blade. She wasn't denying it anymore. She was bargaining. The shadow bent toward her. The chorus of voices sharpened, fusing into one name. Over and over, Michael. Michael! Michael! I remembered the photo in the clubhouse hallway, the one where a man's face had been blacked out, the missing board member, the erased name. Neighbors cowered, some praying, others frozen. The old man who'd spoken sat heavily, tears streaking his cheeks. Kellen dropped to her knees. Her red blazer glowed like a wound in the emergency light. She clawed at the air, reaching for help that would not come. "I didn't have a choice," she sobbed, voice raw. "You don't understand. I had no choice." The shadow bent lower, its edges trembling as if vibrating with fury. The chorus of voices rose, filling the hall with a deafening roar. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the sound cut off. The shadow dissolved, shredding into smoke that seeped back under the clubhouse doors. The silence left behind was unbearable. On stage, Kellen collapsed sideways, her blazer stained with sweat, her face twisted in grief. Her last words echoed in my skull. Even as the neighbors fled around me, I didn't have a choice. But choice or not, the truth had slipped free, and something beneath this neighborhood wasn't finished. Tell me, do you think she hid the crime to protect her own power, or because she was terrified of something darker that still rules the basement? The police came before dawn. I didn't call them. Someone else must have. Maybe the old man with trembling hands. Maybe a neighbor finally too rattled to stay quiet. Whatever the source, by 6 cruisers lined the cul-de-sac, their red and blue lights washing over the brick facade of the clubhouse. Detectives in windbreakers taped off the entrance. Officers hauled equipment down into the basement hatch I had pried open nights earlier. Neighbors clustered at their fences, clutching mugs of coffee like lifelines. I stood on the curb, notebook in hand, watching them emerge, evidence bags, bones wrapped in plastic, a length of rope sealed and tagged, a cracked folding chair, items I had already seen in the beam of my flashlight, now legitimized by badges and chain of custody tags. Mrs. Kellen appeared mid-morning, escorted from her home in handcuffs. Her red blazer was gone, replaced by a gray sweater, her hair loose. She didn't resist, but her eyes darted constantly not at the crowd, not at the police, but back toward the clubhouse door, as though she expected something to follow her out. Reporters descended by noon, vans parked too deep along Willow Creek Drive. Headlines were already forming: HOA president arrested in cold case cover-up. Microphones swarmed. Residents, once mute, now poured out their anger fines, harassment, inspections at midnight. Years of quiet resentment, suddenly justified. By evening, the board had disbanded. The HOA's website shut down. Neighbors whispered about moving away, about selling while they could. Others promised lawsuits. Justice, in a way, was served. And yet, I stayed behind after the cruisers rolled away, long after the news crews packed up. The clubhouse sat quiet, crime scene tape fluttering across its doors. But even sealed, even guarded, it radiated presence. I walked the perimeter at twilight. Crickets chirped, sprinklers hissed, life continued. Then, faint as a breath. I heard it laughter, not manic, not joyful. A low, mirthless chuckle seeping through the bricks, echoing where no one should be. I froze. Recording with my phone. The waveform barely caught it, but my ears did. The sound traveled along the wall, fading, then rising again by the boarded window. I backed away. That night, exhausted, I sat in my study, writing everything down before memory could erode it. I told myself the danger was over, that the system had finally acknowledged what it buried. Then, at 3:02 a.m., my house microphone clicked on. I hadn't touched it. Static filled the speakers, and then the scream tore through my living room, as loud and raw as the first night I moved in. The difference was this time. It was inside my walls. I didn't sleep after the scream bled through my speakers. I sat with every light on, the house bright as a showroom, waiting for a noise that never came. At dawn, I made coffee strong enough to scrape my throat and opened a blank document. Facts first. I wrote like I was testifying dates, times, recordings, copies of notices, the report from 2013, the missing page of minutes, the key, the basement, the rope, the chair, the scratches, the initials, the video stills from the dinner. I linked each item to an image or clip, mapped it to the moment a lie had been told to cover it. When my hands shook, I let them. The work steadied me. By noon, the piece was live, the clubhouse that screamed. I expected blowback letters from attorneys, threats, corrections demanded in furious caps. Instead, I got silence. Then a trickle of emails from strangers who'd once lived here, or in places like it. We moved because of the noise. One wrote, because of the fines we couldn't pay. Another added, because of what we heard under the floor. In the afternoon, the department released an update. The victim's name was no longer redacted. Michael Hart, age 48 in 2013, HOA treasurer, cause of death unchanged, manner under further review. No comment on why the minutes had been torn or why the case had vanished into clerical fog. I printed Michael's name and taped it above my desk, a line of text to replace a hole. The house felt lighter with that one truth spoken aloud. In the days that followed, Willow Creek began to fracture along its hairline cracks. For sale signs sprouted, then bloomed. The HOA's bank account, once a ledger of fees and petty tyrannies, was frozen. The board resigned in a staggered string of statements that said nothing. A temporary management firm taped new rules to the bulletin board, no after-hours access to the clubhouse, no events until further notice, construction and remediation pending. People stopped saying pipes. They started saying basement. I avoided the clubhouse until I couldn't anymore. A week after the arrest, I walked there at twilight with my camera and a copy of my article folded in my pocket. The crime scene tape was gone. The door stood locked. A new chain wound through the handles. A notice from the city hung beside it. Unsafe structure. Do not enter. Inside the foyer windows, the old photo gallery still lined the wall, frames dulled with dust. Through the glass, I found the one I needed the opening day in 2008, the crowd bright with summer shirts. My breath fogged the pain as I leaned closer. Michael was there, not blacked out, not erased. The marker that had smothered his features was gone as if scrubbed by a hand I couldn't see. He stood at the edge of the group, half-turned toward the camera, a man more ordinary than any ghost story hairline retreating, tie too wide, smile small but present. Someone had looped an arm through his just-off frame, only the cuff was visible. The photo had once been vandalized to make a life disappear. Now it had been repaired. I lifted my phone for a shot. For a second. The reflection on the glass replaced my face with his. Not a trick of light, the angle was wrong for that. I exhaled hard and took the picture anyway. Behind me, the street lamps buzzed on, down the block. A moving truck idled while a family loaded the last boxes, eyes never straying toward the clubhouse. I couldn't blame them. At home, I cued the audio I'd recorded since the arrest. The laughter I'd heard the first night after seemed embedded in the walls. But the file showed almost nothing, only a rise in the spectrum where sound should be. I looped it, slowed it, listened until the shape of it pressed into my head. Not joy, not mockery, but relief, fraying at the edges. The way someone might laugh when the door finally gives after years of pushing. Near midnight, I stepped onto the porch. The cul-de-sac was a careful quiet, neighborly only in the way of people who didn't trust the ground. The clubhouse crouched across the street, brick face blank. My phone vibrated once in my palm. A last email, the address I knew, Pergola Watch. Subject done. The body held nothing but a single attachment, a photo of the basement empty. Concrete washed, a rectangle of damp on the floor where the chair had been. No rope, no scratches. The beam of a flashlight caught a faint inscription on the pillar where D.R. had been carved. A second set of initials had been added below in a different hand, M.H. I stared until my eyes burned. Then I closed the phone and sat on the porch steps, the wood warm from the day gone. Justice had been served, in the way people mean when they need to sleep arrests made, evidence bagged, a name restored. But systems, I knew, don't heal in a week, and houses keep a version of what they've witnessed. The night air smelled like cut grass and stone after rain, like the memory of a storm. At 3:02 a.m., my living room speakers clicked on to dead air. No scream, only the faintest hush, as if someone listened from the other side and finally chose not to speak. Maybe that was an ending. Or just an intermission. Tell me if you lived here after everything we uncovered. Would you stay and reclaim the street? Or would you leave, and why?